What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Down Once More. Matt here, and I've got Brad joining me this week for a break from the Love Island USA talk. We are getting back to musicals, and we will be talking A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic starring Timothy Chalamet. I do have a problem, though, Brad, because I just watched tonight's episode of Love Island, and I am angry about it. And so I just want to talk about it. We won't save that for bonus episode on Friday or Saturday this week.
No spoilers.
But I just have to say this might be the worst voting I've seen out of America in recent memory, and I am appalled.
Wait,
I'm kidding.
like,
I'm kidding. It was
the
bad.
audience votes?
Oh yeah, you need to get caught up so you can watch it live because you get to vote and determine who gets eliminated. Yeah, like American Idol.
Oh,
so like there's
so
a lot of drama. Okay, we're talking a little bit Love Island, then we'll get into Bob Dylan. But so people voted, new bombshells come in to kind of mess with couples, see if there's new connections. And recently America voted who to couple up these bombshells up with, and it caused all sorts of drama. And this week America voted for who their favorite boy was and their favorite girl, and the ones on the bottom three were at risk of being dumped, and then the other islanders there had to vote out those three who to dump. And I'm upset about decisions that were made.
Look, if you're staking anything on how America votes, you haven't been paying attention to the world, my friend.
I thought with reality TV, maybe America learned their mistakes because they did a good job with the last vote. They caused some drama. This time, they just sucked it up. But
tough. I'm sorry to hear that. I also want to address something before we get into this movie. And Matt, the second I logged on before we started recording, you made a comment about my appearance. And I just want to say, yes, I am wearing a tank top. Yes, this is how I dress in my normal life. We had friends over. I hopped on in a hurry. I couldn't make myself down once more presentable. This is me. This is who I am. Honestly, if we can't embrace people of all different, varieties, including those people that wear tank tops, we are no better than the communists.
Okay. Well, you look like you're more prepared to talk about Love Island, though, than A Complete Unknown. And so it threw me off. I am wearing proper musical attire. I am wearing a Moondance Diner t-shirt. Good old Jonathan Larson Tick Tick Boom reference. But what we're here to discuss is A Complete Unknown, the musical biopic starring Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan, taking a little bit different take than recent biopics that we've discussed on here. The last two biopics we talked about were Brad joined. We talked about now I'm blanking on the name. Irish Rep. Kneecap. Thank you. We talked about
Incredible
Kneecap.
Movie.
And then I talked a little bit, did a mini review on Better Man, the Robbie Williams biopic, where he is portrayed as a CGI monkey. So very different biopics than this, which is a more serious look. It looks at Bob Dylan's very early career from 1961 to 1965. So the official synopsis is in 1961, an unknown 19-year-old Bob Dylan arrives in New York City with his guitar and forges relationships with musical icons on his meteoric rise, culminating in a groundbreaking performance at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965 that reverberates around the world. That's the official synopsis for this movie. So before we get specifically into the movie, let's talk about, Brad, what is your familiarity with Bob Dylan and what were your thoughts, awareness of him going into this?
First of all, Bob Dylan changed the entire course of my life. I started out my collegiate career as a music major. I wanted to specifically be a music minister in a church because we grew up very religious and those were the only jobs that made sense. And I was playing my guitar and singing in my dorm room, and my roommate came in freshman year, and he said, "Oh, your voice reminds me of someone. I can't place it." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, let me know if you figure it out." It's like, you know what? I know who it is. It's Bob Dylan. And from that moment on, I knew a career in the music industry was not for me, because while Bob Dylan is a absolutely incredible songwriter, brilliant lyricist, his voice is
unique.
Thank you, man. But I really love basically everything from Bob Dylan in this period of time. I love everything from Bob Dylan. I love freewheeling Bob Dylan, up through probably Blonde on Blonde. That early Dylan, the folk Dylan, to like the early electric Dylan, I think is incredible. Highway 61 Revisited is an unbelievable album. So I'm a fan. The Dylan that I like is the Dylan that this movie follows, which is a fantastic experience for me. But when I watched this movie to me was about way more than Dylan, because in the first 20 minutes, we meet probably 4 of my heroes in the musical world and kind of just in the world. Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, and Alan Lomax. Now, Alan Lomax comes off like an asshole in this movie. Hopefully we can get into why I actually think he's a pretty incredible dude, and the complication of what's going on at Newport in 1965. But this movie to me, and I really think maybe to James Mangold, is about more than Bob Dylan. And so I'm excited to talk about this with you.
Perfect. Well, I'm about the complete opposite of you. I have never once in my life gone out and listened to a Bob Dylan song. Going into this, I'm like, I don't know if I know any Bob Dylan songs, but that's like my musical genre preference and how I go about music. I am not very adventurous, just like straight up. It's what I enjoy and am comfortable with, then I run that on repeat. So whether it's stuff that other people introduce me to is usually how I'll get into it. People will tell me about it. I'll listen to it. If I vibe with it, it goes on the playlist. If not, I don't give it a second thought. And I've never been a huge fan of the classics, as I know, sacrilegious as that sounds. And so like classic rock and stuff is not something I usually gravitate towards. I know that's not what this is. I know that's not what this is. But even like folk,
come on.
Like,
have you ever listened to a full Beatles album?
No.
Fuck you! What?
I have not listened to a full Beatles album.
Shit. Not even Sgt. Pepper's. Not even Sgt.
You're gonna blow out the mic. No, I've never listened to a full Beatles album.
This is insane.
This is insane. This is wild. Not. I watched Across the Universe because Rayleigh and I were going to review it, and then that hasn't happened yet. And a spoiler alert, from when that eventually gets reviewed, I hated that movie, and I just like I'm not a big Beatles fan. I'm not. I know, sacrilegious. That's not for me. And I'm big on not yucking other people's yums, Brad. So it's okay that that's not for me. I'm not going to tell you, fuck you, because you do like it.
I'm not the biggest Beatles fan in the world, but they're one of the few bands ever that are not just important because of what they changed in music, but also like unbelievable music.
I'm not saying that they're not important. I'm not saying that they're not good.
That's what
I'm just saying that they're not for me. Like, that's not my jam. That's not what I gravitate towards. It's just not.
This isn't about the Beatles.
No, it's not about the Beatles. You're just going to
say things like, I don't like the classics. How do you feel about the Who?
I like some of the Who songs.
Name a Who song.
Ones that were on Guitar Hero.
Like what?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know of any Who song on Guitar Hero because we didn't have video games growing up, Matt.
We played Guitar Hero anytime we went to cousins.
But we weren't playing the Who. We were playing Shout at the Devil, and we were playing Through the Fire and Flames. And what else were we playing on Guitar Hero?
I really liked the Coheed and Cambria song.
That's Through the Fire and Flames.
No, that's Welcome
Home. Oh, Welcome Home.
That's Dragon Force or something.
You're right.
No, I don't know.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're getting
Lower my heart
sidetracked.
rate. Good
now,
Lord. Sorry. Stop saying so many stupid things, so we can talk about the goddamn
enjoy
movie.
A lot of what this movie is about is the story and the importance of folk in like almost telling a picture of Americana and hopefulness and a little bit of political activism and movement throughout it through Pete Seeger's lyrics.
Mad at you.
And
fuck you.
Okay,
God damn it.
I like some modern like Ron Pope has gotten to be a lot more folk music than his earlier stuff. He reverse Dylan. He started more electric and now he's more folk.
God.
But
good fuck. Jeez.
Okay. Let's get into the movie. Brad, start with, well, first, before we do that, just a few other notes. We already said Bob Dylan's played by Timothy Chalamet. Edward Norton plays Pete Seeger. Monica Barbaro from Top Gun Maverick is where I'm most familiar with her, plays Joan Baez. And Boyd Holbrook plays Johnny Cash. Norbert Leo Butz, the original Fiyero, and Jamie Wellerstein from Last 5 Years plays Alan Lomax. And Joshua Henry has a minor cameo as Brownie McGee, good old Joshua Henry from Tick, Tick, Boom. There's some musical references. But other fun facts before we get into it, both Timothy Chalamet and Monica Barbaro, well, Timothy Chalamet had sung a little bit, but Monica Barbaro learned to sing and play guitar for this role. And all of Timothy Chalamet singing as Bob Dylan, he did all the singing live on set. So very impressive for people to do that. Like they just released a trailer for the Bruce Springsteen biopic with Jeremy Allen White playing Bruce Springsteen. And he did all the singing live for that as well.
No shit.
So,
This is my first time hearing this.
Yeah. Yep. God. They just released the trailer for it. And so that
the bear is the boss
later this year.
I'm psyched. Who directed that?
I'm not positive who is directing it.
That's a make or break.
But yeah. But that I know more Bruce Springsteen songs than I know Bob Dylan songs.
You know Born to Run and Born in the USA, I bet. That's it.
I know.
You live in Nebraska and you don't even know his Nebraska album. You bitch. God damn it. Sorry.
You should be.
Deliver me from nowhere.
A guest on my show and you berate me? Rude.
Yes.
Rude.
Yes.
Rude.
Gosh.
Hey, this is a musical podcast, not a
music podcast.
Music podcast. Yeah. Music and musicals are two very different things. Musicals feature music. Not very different. They're different. They're different. Musical theater and classic music are different.
Yeah. Why would you care to familiarize yourself with what are considered some of the greatest works of audio art of the 20th century?
I do. Sometimes I listen to it when the situation arises like this to discuss this movie.
What it was that you texted me? I'm going to read this to your entire fan base and watch your subscriptions plummet. Matt texted me.
I don't know what I texted you.
As he was watching the movie, he says,
"Oh yeah." I was going to bring it up on here. I'll say I said
I have a confession.
Yeah,
when I'd heard
on here.
The times they are a-changin', in the past I always thought it was an Irish folk song.
Yeah.
Have you heard Irish folk? Did you not live with me?
He sounds
all
like he has an accent during this.
No, he
and I think I know that because
not an Irish accent. You mother godly. I just
sometimes people, when they have accents and they sing, you can't tell they have accents. So that doesn't mean it would be a strong Irish accent. You wouldn't be able to tell. It has some Irish twang on the line, the times they are a-changin'.
What times do you think are a-changin'?
It's about the IRA changing.
No, you.
I'm kidding. I have not listened to that song in depth. I never analyzed the lyrics.
I'm gonna take the wheel here.
Analyzed the lyrics.
No, stop. Matt, I love you.
This isn't a Bob Dylan podcast.
This is not a Bob Dylan podcast, but this is a podcast about the Bob Dylan biopic this week. So, folk music is very important to me. The greatest thing I get to do is once a month, there's a folk circle that I take part of, and we all come together and we play traditional songs and we just sing and we talk and we share stories, and it's incredible, and I love it. These are my people. This is my shit. God damn it, Matt. I swear to God.
My homie, take the reins. I kind of assumed you would anyways, but
if I could pick any time and place to go back in history, my PhD is history. I study the past. If I could pick anywhere, it would be Greenwich Village in the early 1960s. When I say this movie, you see 4 of my heroes in the first 20 minutes. These are my actual heroes. Pete Seeger, to me, is one of the most beautiful souls the world has ever seen. And so this movie had so much in it that just had me really, honestly, emotional. I was choked up a number of times because it put on the screen no gimmicks, just movie magic. The very place that I feel like my heart longs for. The first time we see Joan Baez pick up a guitar and sing. Pete Seeger at Woody Guthrie's side. It was magic for me. And so what this movie is capturing for me is more than just Bob Dylan's turbulent shift from folk to rock, whatever, electric, whatever you want to classify. He's a genius. He defies all categories. This movie for me was being able to live for just 2 hours in Greenwich Village in the 1960s. So I loved that element of it. That being said, we did Kneecap together. Kneecap is such an incredible movie. Also a biopic of artists. And if we're just talking about quality as a movie, these two are completely, you can't compare them. Because Kneecap is creative and expressive and pushes the envelope, and it's in your face, and you have to reckon for it with it for what it is. Mm-hmm. A Complete Unknown is just a good movie. It's, if you ever saw Walk the Line, this is what you can expect from a Mangold biopic. Yeah. Well researched, good presentation of a very famous figure in a compelling and engaging story. I don't feel like it really broke the mold for anything. I don't think that it really pushed any boundaries. It was just good.
Yeah. It, for lack of a better word, it almost felt more informative than entertaining. Like, I'd say Kneecap is an entertaining movie, and this one felt like you were learning more about the history. You were learning more about that time in folk. You were learning more about who Bob Dylan was and that transition and those major players in the folk scene. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Which, it's interesting that you say that, because ultimately this isn't a very faithful, accurate history, right? Like, Mangold isn't trying to give you, and he said this in interviews, he's not trying to give you like a cinematic documentary. He's trying to tell a story, so story over timeline. He's trying to convey something. um, that may or may not be true to how things actually happen. In fact, my wife and I were talking about this movie because we watched it together. We watched it in chunks because that's just how we do things. Mm-hmm. And we were about halfway through, and she was like, "Man, it's really awesome to see how all these songs came about." And I walked through like, this didn't actually happen, and this wasn't written then, and this was a little bit different, and this person, like Sylvie, spoiler alert, isn't a real person. She's based on Suze Rotolo. I hope I'm saying that name right. One of those things read, haven't heard. But she's just like, so if that's none of this is real, this isn't how it actually happened, what's even the point? And my response was, because it gives you, in a short form, a glimpse into who Bob Dylan is and what made him him.
Yeah, that's fair. I thought you called that out about Sylvie, portrayed by Elle Fanning in the movie, and that, yeah, like you said, it was based on the Susan, like you said, Rotolo, probably not pronouncing it right, who was his girlfriend, is on the cover of his Freewheelin' album with him. And it says, so like on IMDb, they had like little notes with it. It said that her name was changed in the film at Dylan's request out of respect for her and her family, as she was the one person portrayed in the film who is not a well-known musician nor a public figure. But I thought it was interesting. They were like, the marketing from the film called that out. And she also wrote a book about her time with Bob Dylan. So I thought that was interesting that they still changed the name, even though, she's not as well known, but she's still, it's not like she's very reclusive. She's put herself out there some.
And she's very well known to Bob Dylan fans. I mean, people that know Dylan, people that know that scene know her.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, she's on the cover of Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. And, I mean, the way Bob has always talked about her, so much great love. And Mangold's he in an interview, I can't remember who it was that he was talking to, he talked about Bob's request. And she passed away, I think, the year after she published that memoir. But other than that, she really stayed out of the public eye. She didn't talk much about her relationship with Bob. And so, kind of like they portray in the movie, his fame and that path was a big thing that kind of divided them. But you can tell, like, Bob loved her. And so this request of him, I actually think it's really beautiful, him requesting that they change her name, because that relationship is so precious to him. And because he's respecting how she lived her life and how she handled things. I find that really beautiful. Which I think maybe this is a good segue into the relationships portrayed in this movie. I find it's probably its strength. The way that Mangold wrote Bob's relationship to Sylvie in the movie, Bob's relationship to Joan, his relationship to Pete, his relationship to Woody, and his relationship to folk music in general was really, really well done, because it conveyed a sense of the complication of actual human relationships. I think often in movies we have these very stark, these relationships defined by black and white shifts, really high, really low, so you can follow with it. But the nuance portrayed in these different relationships, I think, gives it a sense of realism, and it gives it a sense of connection that we're able to really feel with Bob and with these other characters, the highs and lows throughout.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely where Mangold kind of shines through in this as well. And those relationships feel real, and you see kind of, as the movie goes on, the divide too between Bob Dylan and Pete Seeger a little bit, where Bob Dylan senses himself kind of pushing away as he's going towards more electric and feeling not resentful, still having love for folk music, but for feeling like Pete's just tied to the sound of the music, not the lyrics, which you kind of get that culmination at the day of his performance at the finale.
God
what?
Damn it, Matt. No.
What?
So, Newport, 1965. Huge, very famous, very important. Pete wasn't tied to this. It wasn't about the sound of music. And in fact, Pete trying to, what they don't show in the movie that they needed to, what he said to the sound guy and what he was is just like, turn it down. The people need to hear the words. It was always about the words for Pete. He knew what Bob could write and what Bob could say, and he wanted people to hear it. The electric bit, he thought that it was not about the sound. It was all about the words for Pete. Sorry, I love Pete Seeger so much.
But we're going with
so vilified by Bob Dylan fans for
I am saying how it was portrayed in the movie.
Yes, I know.
That is how it was portrayed in the movie.
I'm angry about it. I'm saying I'm mad about it.
Okay.
That's got me.
I was say, don't say that that's not how it was in the movie, because that is how it was portrayed in the movie.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, very frustrated.
Okay, that's fair.
And so, like, also, I can't believe we've gotten this far. For people interested in this period of Bob Dylan's life, you need to go watch No Direction Home, the documentary that was directed by Martin Scorsese, who is probably my favorite director. I love Scorsese. Marty, if you want to come on this podcast to talk about No Direction Home, please, by all means, reach it, shoot for it. You have not because you ask not, right? Anyway, I can't remember which folk singer that was part of the scene and part of that festival he interviews, but they talk about Pete's reaction to Bob's set at Newport 1965.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the issue was Pete Seeger's, the person thought it was because Pete Seeger's dad was there at Newport that year. Now, Pete Seeger's dad was he was a professor of ethnomusicology, which is the study of the music of different ethnic groups. And he specifically was kind of the ethnomusicologist that brought Appalachian music into the academic and then public consciousness, which is really what gave birth to Pete's love of folk music, which brought him to the Library of Congress and all over the place and sparked the folk revival of the mid 20th century. Like, so Pete Seeger, kind of the godfather of the folk revival of the mid 20th century. It's his dad and his work that actually brought that to life. So his dad was there, and the guy's take that Scorsese interviews is that Pete was thinking of his father when he tried to get it turned down and was like, I want them to hear the words. It was about his father, who is a figure that we have so much to thank for the folk music we know and I love. So the relationships, Pete Seeger, sorry, triggered me a little bit. You'll clean it up in post.
No, I'm leaving it all in. I mean, the volume will need to be adjusted, but it's interesting how you're talking about your history, and I appreciate you bringing that in there, because they do, in the movie, it is portrayed more as Pete Seeger is more concerned about the sound, because he tells Bob, like, hey, you brought so much to folk. It's important that you tip the scales the right way and play the music, that you do it in the right way. And
I love that scene, though. It
is a great scene.
The Peril of the Teacup, so good. So good.
Yeah. And then that's what he says it, and Bob's really offended about him saying that he uses his music in the right way, and asks him if he's listened to the music that he's asking Bob not to play. And he tells him that he is. But so with all your research, is the drunk Johnny Cash bit, do you have any knowledge on that, if that's historically accurate?
Johnny Cash was not at Newport in 1965.
Really?
Yeah, not there at all.
Look, so that was more the story that they're trying to tell.
Yes. If you ask about most of the episodes of this movie, they're not firmly grounded in history. Actually, what I think like one of the greatest moments of recreation that's like largely accurate was the recording of like a Rolling Stone. Whereas it was Al Cooper, the guy that played organ, who came in as an extra guitarist. That's real. That's 100% real. And he just like, shoot, I'll try out the organ. I just want to play. 100% real. That was one of those moments that just chills for me. Absolutely amazing. The bit about like refusing to play Blown in the Wind with Joan on stage, probably not real. Like a lot of it was true in spirit, but not necessarily in history. And this is part of, I mean, Mangold understands this, I think, very, very well. I don't think that the fact that it's not a documentary, because there's so many documentaries about Bob Dylan, if that's what you want, watch one of those. But one of the things I think Mangold understands is he only has a little bit of time to help you understand who Bob Dylan is. And the nuance and brilliance, I think, of the way he wrote Dylan is whoever you thought Dylan was, maybe not you, Matt, because you weren't very familiar with Bob Dylan, but for people who generally are, whatever you thought about Bob Dylan, you probably were able to find affirmed in Mangold's depiction of him. So if you think, like me, I tend to think of Bob Dylan as a bit of an asshole. That kind of turned his back on the folk scene. I do feel that pretty strong, and I have my reasons. At me. We'll talk about it. I won't respond to comments. Sorry, don't at me.
I don't think they shied away from that, though. Like, so, they did show that.
But if you think Bob's a bit of an asshole, there's plenty in here to be like, yeah, I knew he was a fucking asshole. If you think he's just a brooding genius, there's plenty in there to be like, yeah, brooding genius. If you think this is like, you know, like an artist struggling with his newfound fame, it's there. He writes a Bob Dylan that captures all the complexities that people tend to like isolate and fixate on. And without privileging or like only doing one of those. I think that's really incredible writing. And it shows how familiar he is with his subject and the respect he has for Bob Dylan. Here's something you'll have something to say about.
Perfect.
So I know it's a Bob Dylan movie, but I thought the women stole the show. I thought Elle Fanning as Sylvie was incredible. There's something about her that is just easy to empathize with. But my God, Monica Barbaro was Joan Baez. Like, I have 5 Joan Baez records. She's one of my favorite folk singers ever. Her voice, the way she tells a story, the way she writes a song, sings a song. I love Joan Baez. And I am so sad that I wasn't around when I could have seen her in this time. And Monica Barbaro made her come alive for me. She looked like Joan. She sounded like Joan. Holy shit, was she Joan. And I mean, those two were incredible all the way throughout. But that moment at Newport in 1965, it was that last one. When, I mean, Bob and Joan had already had their spat, and she was talking shit to him. But all Sylvie saw was that connection while they were singing. And Joan had a tortured relationship with Bob, and it was way more complicated and way more than they could show in this movie.
Right.
But that moment of Monica performing, Elle watching, was such an emotionally impactful and gripping scene. Those two absolutely crushed it and stole the show for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add. I would agree with you. I think that they were both like, it didn't get into too much Bob's like beliefs and motivations before. I felt like the movie kind of portrayed it as Sylvie was one of the ones that got Bob so involved with activism. I don't know if that's case historical, but that is kind of how I felt like it came across in the movie. Bob hadn't really talked about any of his like activism side or beliefs before, and then when he connects with Sylvie and is talking to her, that's one of the first things she tells him, all the things that she's involved with. She's involved with CORE, all these other things, and then her kind of going on the road to help with some of that and travel. And then Bob, we see him playing in kind of quick succession, him playing in Washington at the March 10 segregation and things like that. I felt like, knowing nothing about Bob Dylan's history or anything like that, how it was portrayed to me is that Sylvie was important to him in his activism and kind of kickstarting some of that and fed that side of him. And he connected with her on that level as well, as the emotional level. And Joan was just that one with the passionate, and they had that art that kind of bonded them. So,
yeah. So this was one of my frustrations with the movie, is the relationship between Bob and like the activist folk, the topical folk, part of Greenwich Village, part of that movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's wild to me that you can write a movie about Greenwich Village in 1961 through 1965, and I don't think the word communist came up a single time.
It was heavily implied multiple times. Like when we're introduced to Pete Seeger is at court when he's in trouble with "For This Land Is Your Land."
Yeah. Isn't that insane? We know it as a children's song, but it got people in all sorts of hot water.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete Seeger insisted on singing every verse of that song. Woody Guthrie wrote that song in response to, I think, America the Beautiful. And I said, like, no. This song is for this land is for everybody. And it was a radical, radical song. And there's a great performance of Pete Seeger at Farm Aid in 2013. And he's on stage with John Cougar Mellencamp, Willie Nelson, Dave Matthews, and Neil Young singing "This Land Is Your Land" for the Farm Aid crowd. Unbelievable. A year before he died, he was 93 or 94 years old. Jeez. Amazing. I love Pete Seeger. Sorry. But this movie really downplays the degree to which activist folk was like protest songs and songs for racial equality, anti-war songs for like labor equality, like pro-union. Everything was like part of the warp and woof of Greenwich Village and the folk scene at that time. And this movie really downplays it.
Did you just say the warp and woof?
Yes.
Is that a saying? Is that a thing?
Is. Google it.
I've never heard warp and woof before.
Google it.
Okay, continue.
It's a thing.
I was just distracted. I believe you. I just have never heard it before.
You
like
are
many of Bob Dylan's songs. Or a full Beatles album.
I mean, holy cow. 55 albums, man.
Yeah, that was insane to me. Like, not knowing much about Bob Dylan, the after the credits,
insane.
Like, after 1965, he wrote 55 albums.
More.
I'm like, that is wild.
Not all of them good. Most of them, I would say, not my favorite. But he had this weird, like, convert to Christianity. They really overlooked the fact that his real name is Bob Zimmerman. They like overlooked the
Robert Zimmerman. Yeah,
he's Robert Zimmerman, Jewish kid.
Yeah,
right. Like they blitz past that pretty quick. Yeah. But this is where I think Mangold's kind of love and proximity to Bob Dylan obscures his vision on what was really happening, because Bob Dylan will look back and say, I never set out to be a topical singer. I never set out to be a topical writer. But he really, kind of his big break was when he wrote Blowin' in the Wind and he played it. He went on a freedom ride down to Mississippi, really caught fire. That song was then recorded by Peter, Paul, and Mary, which is Albert Grossman, his manager, kind of put together to be this corporate success. Anyway, he got his start writing topical music, and he can, he did say in 1962, like, I wouldn't call myself a folk singer. I sing folk songs, but I do a lot more than that. he got his start and he connected himself with people writing topical music.
Yeah.
And then once he hit some commercial success, he just absolutely just lorded it over and talked shit over the topical protest singers. There's a story of, there's a group of guys that were kind of all going on. One of them was Phil Oakes, another one of my heroes, who wrote almost exclusively topical songs. So like Jesse Wells, who is really popular today through TikTok and everything. Phil Oakes, very, very similar guy. He just had a song. As soon as something happened, he wrote a song about it.
Okay.
And Bob Dylan, once he started getting success, kind of after freewheeling, he would poke. They would all these guys that were in the scene together would go to a bar together and they would drink. And Bob would show up and he'd be like, Phil, you're just a reporter. You're not an artist. You gotta write like me. And he really was an asshole, even though he got his start writing topical shit. And so he can come back and retroactively like, I wasn't a topical singer, but you fucking were. And in pushing that, sorry, let me just finish this thought.
No, you're
in
fine.
Pushing this, like, I wasn't a topical singer. It was just something I did. It has invalidated for a lot of folk fans the role of topical songs in folk music and the role of protest songs in cultural conversation. This was one of the great gifts of the folk movement of the 50s, really the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, is the ability for voices from the people to write what the people were feeling. But then folk music got this really navel-gazing, this heady kind of bullshit that disconnected itself from the public discourse, disconnected itself from what was happening. And part of that is because people like Bob said, topical stuff, that's not what I do. I'm an artist. So this movie buys into that, I think, false narrative of Bob's. And like you said, puts on Sylvie the activist thing and kind of on Pete from that opening scene. But underplays how important and crucial that was to the movement. This is in the middle of the civil rights campaign. This is in the middle of, Bob did this Newport shit the year after we started the war in Vietnam, after the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So right when the folk scene was really turning towards anti-war and civil rights protests, Bob's just like, peace out. I'm going to be a big deal. So,
I didn't get that as much from the movie because he tried to justify, like he said, part of his switch to electric in the movie. I forget the exact wording. He said it's because he needs to evolve to like what's going on. And like he says, he's talking about the movement changing too. So I felt like they, in the movie, tried to portray it still as some of the topical stuff. He's like, hey, the problems that we're facing in the world right now are changing. So my music needs to change to fit that too, is how he was trying to sell it to Pete a little bit.
Look, this is, I think, in my opinion, lots of people disagree. This is one of those things that has sparked tons of debate. In my opinion, that's a total cop-out. And like, absolutely, an artist should be able to do what they feel they can and should do. But this isn't a principled stand. He was actually taking a step back from being a voice for the oppressed. Yep. He was trying to broaden himself, remove himself from the activist. And like in that era, we're like right out of McCarthyism, the targeted demographic of artists, and say, no, I'm just writing art about everything. This is universal. Yeah. So I look at this as one of those ways that Mangold is really buying
some rose-tinted glasses.
This is absolutely him buying the narrative that Bob's pushing. That's fair. I don't think matches the reality of the situation. Look, I wasn't there, but that's my take.
I do think though that it did, with, like you said, kind of the asshole side of Bob that they portrayed, is they did show like kind of the little bit of resentment that he was getting towards Pete and the folk crowd, and kind of the disdain he had for kind of for the Newport Folk Festival there in 1965. Like, he didn't, it came across as him not really caring about the festival itself. He wanted to play what he wanted to play,
Yeah.
and kind of just the, which, hey, I think artists, like you said, should be able to evolve, do what you want to do. But he didn't care as much about the spirit of it. He's like, we're doing our 3 songs, we're getting in, getting out. Didn't care about people, the organizers kind of pushing Pete away too. He wanted to say what he wanted to say with his music. He felt like his lyrics told what he wanted to tell, and he felt like
Yeah.
his lyrics were true to the spirit of folk, even if the instruments and the way he's playing it isn't what people were used to. But
And
no,
and
I
this
think,
is where
go
I
ahead.
think there's a huge difference. So yeah, there's a shift in Bob's relationship with Pete.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where I think Mangold did a good job portraying there was a difference in approach and even spirit between kind of Alan Lomax and the board
Mm-hmm.
and Pete
Pete.
Seeger. Like when Alan and the board went to Bob, was just like, "What are you playing? We need to know. This is what people are here for. This is what it's about." Pete
More
was very much like,
confrontational.
"We're trying, like I want, like we're trying to bring healing. We're trying to bring change. I want you to be part of that, and I know the
Yeah.
power you bring." Right? Like Pete is such a beautiful soul, and Edward Norton plays him beautifully.
Yeah.
But in Alan Lomax, Alan, just a word about Alan Lomax. I love Alan Lomax. His brother John also pivotal. Alan Lomax was one of the greatest recorders and collectors of American folk music.
Mm-hmm.
And he would go to all over places. Like anybody in Appalachia that like had a song, he was like, "Let me record it." And there's some
Mm-hmm.
great recordings. One of my prized possessions is actually the Library of Congress folk recordings of Woody Guthrie's music, and it's Woody Guthrie playing his songs in conversation with Alan Lomax, and Alan's asking him like, "Tell me about this song." Like, "Oh, when you go to these dance halls, what were they playing?" And it's an absolutely incredible thing. And Alan really cared about folk music as the voice for people that nobody else in society would listen to. And so him being like, if this is just the same crap that you can get by putting a nickel in the jukebox, by turning on the radio, we're not doing the thing. We're no longer being
Yeah.
the voice for the people. We're broadcasting the voice of the record labels. And I think Albert Grossman in the movie portrays that. And in real life he did, right? But when the record labels got their hands on folk music, people who saw it as the voice of the people saw that as a perversion. And that's where Alan's coming from. He's really comes across as a total asshole, but there's a reason
Mm-hmm.
why this was such a contentious thing at Newport.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I think we kind of mixed in things you liked and didn't throughout it, and highlights. It's kind of flowed well. So I have 2 questions.
Yep.
First, what were your overall thoughts about the movie then? If you're summarizing it, recommendation, yes, no, rating, like, what did you think of it as a whole?
I think that it is a really enjoyable biopic. It's a really, really good focus on one person because it shows the complexity and nuance of life. And it's a great kind of entry point for people not familiar with folk music. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the way it's presented and the songs they choose are a great opportunity for people that might not be familiar with this scene and this music to really understand the spirit and the heart and the emotion behind a lot of it. And I think that they presented it very well.
Okay. My second question then is, do you think that if you didn't know as much about the history of these people and their portrayals, would you have enjoyed it more? If you just had like you enjoyed folk, but you didn't know how they kind of warped a little bit of Pete Seeger's portrayal at the end, or how Alan Lomax was portrayed. If you didn't know those things, do you think you would you have enjoyed the movie more?
I don't think so. I think for me, part of the magic was getting to see something that just by nature of the time I was born, I never had the opportunity to see. I got to see Joan Baez in Greenwich Village playing in a small venue bar singing her songs. I got to see Pete Seeger being this like fatherly figure, beautiful soul that he is. Even though there's things about it that I, don't prefer, I found so much about this movie to be magical and moving because I love and am so invested in these people and these characters. So I think that really it does have something for everyone. I do think if you just hate Bob Dylan, you probably won't like the movie.
Fair. I think my thoughts as a whole, I'm not a Bob Dylan hater by any means, but not like an avid listener, not knowing anything, being unfamiliar. I did like, there's enough. I enjoyed the movie for what it was. Like you said at the beginning, it's just a good movie. Like he does with Walk the Line. It's good storytelling. The characters are written well. The story, the pacing moves pretty good. I mean, there's that
2 hours jump. And 12 minutes doesn't feel like it.
I will say the time jump to 1965 and then that version of Dylan was a pretty stark shift.
Yeah.
Like that was a pretty big difference there, I felt like. And that's when his asshole nature got heightened in the movie, in the portrayal. So that was a bit jarring, just that big time jump and then that difference. But overall, I thought the music was like, I enjoy when, even though it may not sound exactly like what you're used to, but when the actors and when they learn to play the songs and sing themselves, it feels more natural than if they just then are lip syncing to recordings of the actual person playing. Like that can take me out of it some. So I appreciate, like, mad respect to Timothy Chalamet and Monica Barbero, and I'm pretty sure Edward Norton was singing as well. But all those people who were performing, big respect for them.
Absolutely.
And so I enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. Now, to be honest, I don't think it's one that I see myself going back to and revisiting and rewatching, just because that's not necessarily my jam. But I really enjoyed it. Like, I was locked in. I watched it in 2 sessions, but that was because I had some stuff come up that I had to get interrupted. But I would have had no problem being like fully engaged and watching this through completely. Like, it kept my interest the whole time.
So maybe to close, let me ask you one question, Matt. Mm-hmm. In the press junket for this movie, Timothy Chalamet said, I believe he said that this is the movie he is most proud of. Based on young Timothee's filmography, do you think that this should be the movie he is most proud of?
I personally think it should be his SNL skits where he's the white rapper with Pete Davidson.
Sure.
But
putting those aside.
No, I think he did a really good job at it. There were a couple of times when, to me, it seemed like he was doing a little bit more of a caricature, like where it didn't seem as natural and forced, but those times were few and far between. And I think overall he did a good job portraying it. And it's so different from anything else he's played, I felt like. So I felt like he stepped up and he did a good job portraying. I mean, again, this is as someone who's not very familiar with Bob Dylan. Like there's performances I've been able to look at in semi biopics, like Andrew Garfield as Jonathan Larson in Tick, Tick, Boom was fantastic, how he encapsulated his performances, his mannerisms. So that I was a little more familiar with. So I was able to see that and see it shine through. But not having that point of reference with Bob Dylan, I felt like Timothée Chalamet did a great job in the role.
He did a great job in the role. First of all, I think if we're talking Chalamet movies, I haven't seen all his stuff. But I would easily put Dune 1, Dune 2, and Call Me By Your Name.
I haven't seen Call Me By Your Name.
It's so good. Yep. Big fan. Love it.
But it has the cannibal in it.
It does. That's tough. But the movie's good. Okay. I think, once again, we've said this is just a good movie. And I'm not talking shit on James Mangold here. Timothy did a great job embodying Bob Dylan. I mean, his mannerisms, everything. He did a phenomenal job. But to me, the movie is so just like down the line, middle of the road.
Yeah.
Fine. That the art and what makes his Bob Dylan impressive feels pedestrian because there's nothing really boundary pushing. The movie is just kind of what you would expect. And so you just kind of expect Timothy to be Bob. And the skill and the craft of his portrayal of Bob Dylan, I think, gets subsumed into the kind of normal vibe of the movie. So, Tim, you should be proud of this movie. You killed it. There's been other experimental Bob Dylan biopics that if you're really looking for it to push things, I don't see this as his best role yet. His best role, and I am really interested to see where his career takes him. He very different actor than Leo, but he seems similarly attuned to big roles and big performances. So can't wait to see what we see from him in the future.
I guess one last thing, because you brought it up. Can you think of a biopic portrayal that you would say kind of pushes things and is a little bit over there and bumps it to the next level, in your opinion? Do you have any in mind?
So Cate Blanchett has actually played Bob Dylan.
What?
Yes. And I can't remember what the name. I'm Not There. That really pushed things. Yeah, the Todd Haynes 2007.
Is that with biopic. Joaquin Phoenix?
I don't think so.
What's the one he's in?
This is the one that...
Oh, that's I'm Not Here.
Yeah.
No, that's not.
Yeah,
What's the one? But that's a different one.
I'm Not There. I don't know. But this is Christian Bale, Cate Blanchett. But they have a different... Richard Gere, Heath Ledger, and Ben Whishaw. Marcus Paul Franklin. So there's a different actor for each different era of Bob Dylan. That pushed the boundaries.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very polarizing movie. So at Newport, when they played like a Rolling Stone, instead of playing like a Rolling Stone, they all pulled out machine guns and just gunned down the crowd.
Oh.
That pushed the boundary. So I get what you're saying. When you're portraying a true, like a real to life character, you're not always looking for boundary pushing.
I'm thinking of I'm Still Here.
Oh yeah, the one where Phoenix. Yeah, his long project. Anyway, but
yeah, okay, interesting.
Look, we can talk all night. I think people get the gist of what we have to say about Like a Rolling Stone, but let Matt know in the comments what we screwed up on, as you so often do.
Yes. Come at us. Let us know your thoughts on A Complete Unknown. What other biopics should we discuss next? We'll do the Springsteen one when it comes out. But
yeah,
let us know what else
we
should talk about.
Drop a comment if you want that 8 Mile
episode. I'm down for 8 Mile. All right. That'll do it for this week's episode. Thank you to Brad for joining us I'm trying to potentially have a guest lined up for the week 4 Love Island recap.
Marty?
So
Martin Scorsese?
Yeah, he's coming on to talk Love Island USA
big fan.
season 7 week 4. But no, so that will either drop Friday night or Saturday, depending on how recording and things line up with that.
Next movie should be Sinners.
Yep, July we will talk about Sinners. So it comes out on HBO Max for streaming, I think July 2nd, so early July, so you have plenty of time to watch it there.
Watch it now, as soon as you can.
Yes, next week's pod episode will be going over what's coming to streaming and theaters in July. So you'll get a plug there and you'll get the exact date Sinners is coming to HBO Max. So tune in for that next week. And then, like I said, July's movie will be Sinners, and Brad will be joining for that as well. So thank you all. Love y'all. Comment, follow, subscribe, like. Yeah.
You're saying that now. All right.
Yeah. Okay. I love bomb my fans now. That's what I do. That's what we do. Learn it from Love Island. Apparently, toxic behavior gets you to go far.
Look, it's only called love bombing after you break up. Otherwise, it's called romantic.
Or if other people are jealous, they will call it love bombing.
It's true.
No, you watch Love Island, and then we'll have the love bombing conversation. So get caught up. That's your assignment.
All right, love bombing episode coming in August.
All right, perfect. All right, follow, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Share it with your Bob Dylan friends, folk fans, to come after and enjoy Brad's takes and roast me in the comments. So, thank you all. Don't forget to go down once more. Later.